Edwardian inventiveness celebrated by BBC4, and tonight recently voted the greatest invention of all time, the bicycle. Fascinating.
It's not the steam engine. It's not the printing press. It's not the microchip or even the television. No. The invention that has been hailed as the greatest of all time is the humble bicycle. It's been credited with revolutionising social mobility and even extending the gene pool. It was the Edwardians who set the bicycle on the road to becoming a universal mode of transport. And whatever its incarnation, it is still the design classic it was 100 years ago. You'd have thought the Victorians had reinvented the wheel, they were so taken with their own contraptions. They came up with all manner of designs, but the velocipedes and bicycles of the 1800s were large, cumbersome, and not very safe. Steve Bagley is curator at the Transport Museum in Coventry.
The bicycle I'm riding at the moment is a high ordinary, an ordinary bicycle, or the nickname was a penny farthing. It's a really difficult bike to ride. It's hard to get on, even harder to get off. It's got solid rubber tyres, so it's not particularly comfortable when you're riding it. You're sitting right on top of the front wheel in quite a precarious position, and it has no brakes. So all in all, not the safest of rides. You have to be quite athletic to ride it, you have to have specialist clothes to ride it, and during the Victorian period this really discriminated against women riding these. In fact, very few women ever tried to ride a penny farthing. The worst thing about riding one of these bikes is trying to get uphill. The pedals are fixed to this really big front wheel, and you're turning that wheel every time you want to go uphill, and that really makes it very, very difficult. And it's bloody hard work. Okay, can I get off now?
The bicycle would only take off as a consumer item if people were able to stay on it. So the race was on to come up with the most effective design. In 1885, the winner of that race was bicycle manufacturer John Kemp Starley.
He solved the problem of the bicycle. And what was said was, at the time, the main principles which guided me in making this machine were to place the rider at the proper distance from the ground, connect the cranks with the driving wheel in such a way that the gearing could be varied as desired, to place the seat in the right position in relation to pedals, to place the handles in such a position in relation to the seat that the rider could exert the greatest force upon the pedals with the least amount of fatigue. That's it. That is the modern bicycle.
The aptly named Rover safety bicycle was born. With pneumatic tyres and a new shaped frame, it was the perfect combination of function and design.
Well, the design of the Rover safety cycle, the most important element is the diamond-shaped frame. So we have a frame with a solid crossbar coming down. See the diamond in here, and that's really important because gives the bike a lot more rigidity, especially with the crossbar, and it makes it easier to ride and makes the bike faster because there's less give that way as you're pushing down into the pedals. This is a much better, safer place to sit than over the top of a front wheel of a penny farthing. Obviously, you can't go over the front of this because you're further back, and in relation to the pedals, you're sitting with the pedals just slightly in front of you, which means that your downward pressure into the pedals is much more efficient than it is when you're sitting right above them on a penny farthing. And the pneumatic tyres really added a lot of suspension to the bike. So they're the main elements of the Rover safety bike.
The safety bicycle had immediate appeal to men and women and was quickly put into production. People loved the bicycle and couldn't get enough of it. And by the Edwardian era, mass manufacturing meant it became cheaper and more available, from a toy for the rich to a must-have for the affluent middle classes. But the safety bicycle still had a way to go before it became the sit-up-and-beg we still see today. And it was the enterprising Edwardians who put the final touches to the design.
Mate, riding my bike, what could be more enjoyable?
Doug Pinkerton is a collector and restorer with a passion for Edwardian bicycles. His favourite Edwardian ergonomic marvel is the Dursley Pedersen, one of the most innovative designs of the time. It went into production in Dursley, Gloucestershire in 1902. Doug is restoring one back to its original grandeur.
This machine here, the Dursley Pedersen, when you look at it, it's designed round the hammock saddle. When you're actually riding, instead of you sliding across the top of the saddle like you would on a modern saddle or a leather saddle, you actually sit in it and it rocks with you, so it is very anatomically comfortable. But what it still does give you is the 4 fixing points, which is the handlebars, the saddle, and down here the pedals. And anything in between is obviously joined up in the basic diamond pattern. All he's done is just add a few extra tubes in to give his cantilever effect. On this machine we've actually got aluminium rims. So for the first time aluminium was used on bicycles. And it is actually slightly lighter than a modern diamond frame machine. But basically he's still got the same layout, just with a few extra tubes. They were trying everything. There was no set pattern, there was no real set criteria to say this is the design of bicycle you're going to use. Everybody was trying all the different ideas just to see what would work and what would last. And those that really didn't work were just abandoned, and then the ones that have just stood the test of time, like the diamond frame and the use of aluminium.
Doug has asked a group of highly competitive cyclists at the Halesowen Velodrome in the Midlands to try out some of his prized collection. They're more attuned to today's high-tech and high-spec racing bikes. So how will they adapt to these museum pieces?
Yeah, what we'll also do is we'll have that machine over there as well, please. Right, gents and ladies, ladies and gentlemen, as you've seen, you've all had a look at the machines. We've got various ones here. Angela will be riding a 1906 Ladies Singer. Pamela will be riding a 1908 BSA.
These bikes were as high-spec as you got in the 1900s. But the most important gear change in cycle design came in the form of an invention in 1902. It transformed cycling.
I believe this is the most important invention of the Edwardian period for cycling, the Sturmey Archer hub gear. It was a really liberating invention because it allowed people to ride bicycles with different gears, made it easier to rise, easier to go uphill, easier to go downhill, and just enabled more and more people to go cycling, people who wouldn't have even contemplated going cycling before if you had to go out on a penny farthing.
Meanwhile, Sue here will be riding a 1904 Ladies Dursley Pedersen with the 3-speed hub gear, and I shall be riding the Gents Dursley Pedersen all-weather model.
Another new but simple invention cranked the bicycle up another notch towards the models of today.
What I've got in my hand here is a free wheel. This would fix to the back wheel of a bike and it would allow the bike to roll without you pedalling. Before the Edwardian period, most bikes had a fixed wheel, so this would fix to the back wheel and always went round when the pedals went round. When you got this, you could have a rest while you were going along. So another really good invention that allowed more and more people to go cycling.
It's very difficult to get on these machines like you would a normal bike by leaning it over and swinging your leg over. What they actually had is, on the Gents machine, they've got a small mounting step on the rear axle. And what you would have done was take hold of the handlebars, put your foot on the step, and then slowly scoot away.
Oh, God, no.
Oh, so...
Now, with the ladies, it's obviously Very more elegant because at the time, ladies were not allowed to show their ankles, so you had to be a bit more ladylike. What you would do, stand there with the handlebars turned slightly sideways. You then, with one strong scoot, move up onto the saddle, and away you go. So, I shall get a bicycle as well. A quick scoot, OK?
Go on, fellas, off you go.
Onto the saddle, and away you go.
Go on, off you go. Right, well done, Sam.
I'm sure we've all had that moment. A universal moment of experience is the first proper bicycle ride, that wobbling moment when you've set off and suddenly you're going.
I can't do it.
You're going forwards comfortably, you're not going to fall off. That is a fantastic moment, and that's what the safety bicycle gave everybody.
Very elegant, Mr. Baker. And you can see the difference in the riding style. You're very much upright. It's quite an enjoyable ride. And of course, in this more upright position, you are actually able to see over hedges and see more of the countryside, which was the thing with Edwardian cycling. You know, it was very much an age of exploration.
What the bicycle offered was the sense of I get it out of the shed and I can ride down the road all on my own. I don't need anybody else to help me. No other piece of personal transport has ever had the same immediacy as the bicycle.
So if you can catch the ladies up. Stays up there a bit so you can relax. There are rides around the country where you can come with Edwardian and Victorian machines and you get like-minded people who are enthusiastic, and we take them out and we have, you know, like a 15 to 18 mile ride on them with a pub stop. We've got to have your pub stop, like an old tea room. One more lap, folks.
Hold your line, Boozy.
Hold your line, Sue. Just be careful when you get off. Remember, it's your first time on.
That's a bit different, that was.
It's different.
Totally different animal to what I normally ride. And I mean, it's just, I think it's laid back and relaxed.
Slightly more comfortable because you've got sort of the suspension in like the seat, and
I like being upright. It's a much better position than being down and creasing up your middle.
The saddle actually moved, unlike the one I've got, which is obviously completely rigid. This, as you pedal, this moves with you, and you can feel it. And that was very weird to begin with, but really comfortable.
I wished life was a bit more like this, sort of a little bit more laid back, and sort of more, instead of this frenetic sort of whizzing round everywhere. And I think we ought to sort of go back and have a try at this again, and sort of, you know, just go out and just sort of enjoy cycling.
Throughout the Edwardian era, the larger cycle companies were dominating the market, churning out bicycles by the thousand. That meant one thing: more bikes for everyone.
It became cheaper, everybody could have one, and social mobility as a concept really takes off at that point. But in principle, quantity of manufacture makes the thing available to a huge market.
Another great invention of the era had a surprising benefit for the budding cyclist. The rich had moved their attention to the motor car, which made the bike available to a new class of buyer.
So when the rich people not buying these bikes, there was suddenly a surplus of cheaper bikes on the market, second-hand bikes. And you can see lots of adverts in cycling magazines of the Edwardian period showing these cheaper second-hand bikes. So on the whole, during this period, bikes became cheaper, more and more people could afford them, although you'd still have to have quite a lot of money to buy a brand new bicycle.
The bicycle was now a democratic means of transport. No longer the preserve of the very rich, ordinary working men and women could now afford one. But the biggest market was still the middle classes, with their increasing wealth and aspirations. They embraced it with a passion. For the new cyclists of the Edwardian era, the bicycle was an opportunity to get out and about, a pastime that hasn't been forgotten.
It's an hobby. We want to keep these bikes alive. Without riding these machines, they just become museum pieces. We're a reenactment group who are doing it from the standpoint of sociable cycling, the beginnings of people getting together, getting on the bikes and riding out and giving freedom to the Victorians and Edwardians. That's what it all started through. It's not about racing, it's about going out, enjoying yourself and getting a little fitter in the process. And we're no different as Edwardians. All the members of the Desford Lane Pedallers, we own bicycles, we collect bicycles, and this is one that is really the Rolls Royce of the Edwardian period. It was made by John Marsden's company in Wolverhampton, actually called the Golden Sunbeam, and it came out of a long line of bicycles made by this company, and it really was the pinnacle in cycling. It was made in 1909. It's gold-leafed rather than painted. It has a oil bath chain, so the chain is constantly submerged in oil, so it never goes rusty. It's got aluminium rims, a new development in technology, very light but very strong. It has a back pedal brake, gears, 2 gears, and little details such as if you screw the ends of the handle grips off, you've got a puncture repair kit inside. So on this side you've got your canvas, and this side you've got your glue. And then cleverly you've got an oil can that sits under the saddle. So every bit of space on the bike is used. The sail patter in the Edwardian and just after the First World War was buying a Sunbeam is like buying a coffin. You only ever buy one. But it wasn't cheap. These bikes were £16, 16 shillings in 1909, which if you compare that to today, you're looking at some of the region £1,500 for a bike. So this wasn't for the working class. This was for the middle class of the wealthy.
The middle classes had the Victorians to thank for another liberating invention, the railways.
In the Edwardian period, the railway system was absolutely at its peak. You could get anywhere, you could do anything, simply because the trains were there. The bicycle, in a funny way, was an extension of that. You could take your bicycle with you on the train. You could plan a trip which involved your bicycle. So the bicycle and the train actually relate together quite closely. Everybody says, of course, it expands the gene pool because people no longer marry the girl next door, they marry the girl from 5 villages away. Therefore, the impact of mobility on society is quite revolutionary. We completely restructure ourselves because we can move around, and move around very cheaply.
In the Victorian era, there was a huge barrier between urban life and rural life. The countryside was regarded with suspicion or indifference by city dwellers. But in the early 1900s, a new, more romantic idea emerged: the country idyll.
We begin to see the country as something that's actually fun, it's pretty, it's ours, it's a leisure park, it's where we go and relax. And the bicycle is the perfect way into it, because you can see it, you can explore it, uphill, down dale, stop at a cafe, and then go comfortably back to your terraced house, your suburban box, having experienced the pleasures of the country.
This idealised image was far from reality. The countryside was in trouble. Workers had left it for the big cities, and it was suffering extreme poverty. But a positive spin-off of cycling clubs was they could do their bit for the local economy.
During the Edwardian times, the cyclists who would band together into local clubs or join the cycling touring club, the national club, which would then adopt either pubs or tea rooms and put a sign up saying that cyclists were able to stop at these pubs and were entitled to have refreshments. That really kept a lot of the pubs alive. So the countryside really benefited from the beginnings of the bike.
And the development of tarmacked roads in the towns made cycling more practical and much more comfortable.
Erratic road surfaces were gradually being smoothed out during this period. Tarmac or versions of it were being spread increasingly across rural lanes. So those bumpy, stony tracks were disappearing under a much smoother finish bit by bit. The common nature, the common experience of the puncture diminishes enormously during this time, and that of course makes the whole thing much, much more acceptable.
As cycling became more pleasurable and universal, women saw it as a route to freedom.
It's a combination of women wanting to be more independent and enjoying the freedom that the bicycle offered, and the manufacturers saying, hey chaps, there's a whole new market out there, let's go for it.
The bicycle found a brand new market. But there was a problem. What to wear?
The costume I'm wearing today is late Victorian, early Edwardian costume, traditional to the rational dress that would have been worn of that period. For ladies riding on loop frames, they did have the skirt clip, or called a skirt lifter, which helped to stop the skirt catching in the chain. This sort of costume would have enabled the ladies of the Edwardian period to ride along on their bicycles and join the gents and have a very enjoyable day.
But this more tailored masculine style of dressing didn't go down well with everyone.
The idea that women would wear what looked like men's clothes to ride bicycles, I think some people found quite offensive, because they said, actually, it isn't about women coming into our territory, it's about women demeaning themselves. We want women to look like women, not curious versions of us with long hair.
But women were determined to pursue this exciting new pastime and to find practical, comfortable clothes to do it in.
I've created this costume myself based on an American designer, turn of century. And it's for a lady's rationale dress, which is a flat hat, a small jacket and culottes, which are gathered in at the base so it looks like a skirt. For a lady to wear culottes and to get on a bicycle that was made for her was incredibly liberating. It meant that she was no longer tied to the house. She could go to the village or into the town shopping in a perfectly decent and moral manner, as it were.
But as more and more women joined cycling clubs, it took her to less respectable venues. The presence of women in public houses was met with a mixed reaction. There are even accounts of women being shown the door.
Suddenly, villagers who were used to women having a certain position and a certain status and a certain place in that village life, there suddenly were these brazen hussies wearing funny clothes and demanding to be served in pubs. You can understand why the reaction occurred. People were simply outraged by what appeared to be an affront upon a very structured pattern of society. That reaction was probably stronger in the Edwardian period than subsequently, because it was the first time that this major challenge had actually taken place with something so accessible as the bicycle.
While the middle classes were finding new social freedoms, the working classes were adapting the bicycle for a more practical purpose. It began to play a crucial role in trade, industry and communications.
This is a grocer's delivery bike. During the Edwardian period, bikes were not only used for leisure and for going to work, but actually for work. And it was a thing that grew during the 20th century, but it was really started off in the Victorian and Edwardian period. And of course, the other opportunity for a bike like this was to put some advertising on it. The butcher or the grocer could advertise his shop or her shop, while the delivery boy was out delivering goods. And then, of an evening, the delivery boy would be able to use this bike to go out courting his girl. Courting, that's a lovely old-fashioned word, isn't it? Courting.
Today, 95% of the bikes we ride are made outside the UK, in China and Taiwan. But the tradition of the sit-up-and-beg Rover safety bicycle still lives on at Pashley of Stratford-upon-Avon. They are hand-producing bikes for today's customers, and they are still using the Sturmey Archer gear system.
This is the Pashley Roadster, which is a gentleman's bicycle. In terms of design, it hasn't really altered since the original Edwardian period. It's a classic diamond frame. It's a 3-speed Sturmey Archer hub gear. They still remain as a brand today, much like Hoover is the generic name for a vacuum cleaner or Kleenex is the generic name for a tissue. People say they've got Sturmey Archer gears. In terms of design, it's not really been bettered over that 100 years for commuting and general riding. We very much are a traditional style of bicycle maker. We use lugs and brazing by hand. We powder coat, which again is a hand process, and then assembly, the final assembly of the bicycle, is done by hand as well. So it's a very traditional method, but one that we find works and offers the quality that we like to produce, so it's very important to us.
One of Pashley's biggest customers could be riding a bike on a street near you.
A large part of our business is actually producing bikes for industry. Our largest customer probably being the Royal Mail. You may have seen a postie on a bike which will be a Pashley. They keep a fleet of around 30,000 bicycles. The bikes we make for them are recycled on an ongoing basis. The comfort of the bike is very important to those looking to use them day in, day out for quite hard jobs.
We're actually going to see what the old machines will compete like. And actually we've got the 4 lads here. Race for Edwardian Cycles. Normal rules apply, no switching, no holding back of your opponents. Keep it clean and may the best person win.
Are you ready, riders?
Yeah, we're ready.
Over to you, Mr. Starter.
Well, get you. Get on his wheel this time. I think it's gone really well. People have come along today on their modern machines, tried the Edwardian cycles out and realised what a different position, certainly in the riding style, and how the machines handle, and certainly the use of gears that were being developed in the early days. It's been a really good day.
The bicycle has a unique place in design and social history, and the Edwardian legacy is still with us.
We're finding that there's a return to this style of bicycle by a lot of people. The hub gears, sit-up and beg style and the reliability are all combined to make an ideal commuting vehicle, or one that can be used in industry as well.
The Edwardian period made bicycles accessible, so everybody, regardless of their age, whether they were women, men, it made cycling accessible to everybody.
There is no doubt that the car age is coming to an end. What are we going to do when we are not allowed to get in our car or can't afford to get in our car? We can walk or we can bicycle. The bicycle will always be there, long after the car is dead and buried.
I like the way you move.
A lusty Edwardian beauty with a champagne lifestyle complete with a toy boy to play with. The rise and scandalous fall of the world's first pop diva, next on BBC4, starring Jessie Wallace, as you've never seen her before. Stay right here.